Verso Studios and Westport Library's annual Music and Media Festival.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. I'm Bill Harmer, Executive Director of the Westport Library. We thank you all for being here to support VersoFest, our 4th annual celebration of music, media, and storytelling. Since our grand reopening in 2019, the Westport Library has been rewriting the rule book on what a public library can be. We've racked up a lot of firsts over the last 5 years, and I'm just going to name a few. The Westport Library is the first library in the world with a state-of-the-art recording and TV broadcast studio with the launch of Verso Studios at the Westport Library. In fact, we're streaming this event right now from our broadcast studio. 15, 16 camera shoot for those that are going to be watching this from home. The library is also the first to launch an independent record label, Verso Studios, or excuse me, Verso Records. And yes, we were the first library to release and record and produce a vinyl record entirely created within a public library. This record right here, Verso Records Volume 1. You can give it up for that. Some of the bands that are on this record were curated by Rock and Roll Hall of Famer and legend Chris France of the Talking Heads, who's with us in the audience tonight. And this morning, if you missed the action, we officially became the loudest public library ever. Clocking in, folks, at 119.1 decibels. That is louder than a jet engine. So that moment this morning was part of a 90-minute celebration hosted by visionary artist Five Fingers. His artwork is all over the building. He's our official artist for the festival. And we had a rotating cast of DJs that helped turn the volume up at the library, literally. So let's hear it for libraries that rock. Of course, none of this would happen and work without all of you, our community. Your support is what powers our vision forward. So help us continue to make VersoFest the best media festival by any public library in the world. We are building something truly unique here, folks, and we're just getting started. So stick with us. Now, I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge our sponsors. Without them, we literally would not have been able to put together this festival this year. If they want to stand, they deserve the recognition, but if you don't want to stand, sponsors, you don't have to. But let's start with our main stage sponsor and dear friend, Darcy Travelos. The ever generous and thoughtful Dick Wingate and his wife Lydia. Maybe no greater Verso Studios supporters in the world than our passionate champions, Les and Samira Dinkin. Interstate Lumber. Little Big Brands and John Nunziato, who lit up the library literally for VersoFest weekend. If you've seen those beautiful lights at night outside of the building, John Nunziato, we have him to thank for that. So thank you, John. And a couple more, Comfort Care Home Care, thank you for your generosity. And for our long-term tech partners, D&R Labs. They are responsible for all of the technology in this facility. Thank you. So last year, we brought in about 3,000 attendees for VersoFest 2024 from across the region and even across different states. We're on track to beat that this year. In the first 2 nights, over the first 2 nights, we've had nearly 1,500 people who came out to see Rock and Roll Hall of Famer and legend Patti Smith on Thursday night. And again, last night, about 700 people came out for Jacob Dylan and the Wallflowers. maybe our best concert ever, but this is what it means when we talk about community, creativity, and what culture can look like in a public library. So thank you. So, we're about to kick off a panel that was actually the first event to sell out. So Arlen, remember that. First event to sell out, beat Wallflowers, everybody else. So clearly, we've got some Bruce Springsteen fans in the house tonight. Yeah. To get things started, it's my pleasure to introduce a dear friend, a member of our Verso Studios advisory board, and a true legend in the music business, Mr. Dick Wingate. For those of you that know Dick, you know that his story reads like a Hollywood script. He started as a DJ and program director at Brown University, for any alumni here at WBRU, where he first met Bruce Springsteen. From there, he joined Columbia Records, working with Bruce, Elvis Costello, Peter Tosh, and Pink Floyd. He discovered Amen Man, held senior roles at Polygram and Arista Records, and helped pioneer digital music as SVP at Liquid Audio, where he led the first digital distribution levels with major labels. Today, he is a founder of DEV Advisors, helping artists, content creators, and tech innovators shape the future of music. So please join me in welcoming the legendary OG, Dick Wingate.
Thank you so much, Bill. It's great to see everybody here. Thank you for coming. We're very excited about this. We've been putting this together for a while, and I want to introduce the gentleman who actually conceived of it, Arlen Schumer. There he is. Arlen is an award-winning illustrator and pop culture historian. ABC Television called him, quote, one of the country's preeminent authorities on comics and culture. His coffee table art book, The Silver Age of comic book art, won the Independent Publishers Award for Best Popular Culture Book. And the BBC said that his works on the legendary TV show The Twilight Zone, like his recent book, the 5 themes of The Twilight Zone were, quote, a cut above the rest, full of passion and erudition. Arlen was the art director of the first magazine about Bruce Springsteen, Thunder Road. He did that while he was studying graphic design at Rhode Island School of Design. He contributed significant illustrations to Springsteen's Darkness on the Edge of Town tour. And was a longtime contributor to the long-running Bruce magazine, Backstreets. He lectures and produces webinars on these and other pop culture history subjects at universities and cultural institutions nationwide, such as the 4-day symposium on the Twilight Zone that Arlen produced here at the Westport Library last fall. It was just crazy busy all 4 nights. As I mentioned, he conceived of this panel and designed its logo as well. And I think that's it. Great. Please welcome Arlen Schumer.
Thank you, my friend. I love you. Okay. Just take a sip of water here. First of all, I want to thank the Westport Library Executive Director, Bill Harmer. I want to thank the tech people, Alex Giannini, Travis, and David in the tech room over there, and everybody at the Westport Library for making this incredible event happen. I want to welcome all the Bruce fans out there in the audience and the Bruce fans streaming literally around the world. Thank you for the Westport Library streaming this event. So as Bruce himself said for the first time in 1977, are you alive? Are you alive? Yes! Okay, let us begin then. The first rock and roll song I can remember hearing in summer of camp in '63 when I was 5 years old was the Four Seasons' Big Girls Don't Cry with the unforgettable falsetto of Frankie Valli. But I thought the lyrics were Big Girl, Small Fry. My next seminal rock and roll childhood event was the Beatles' first appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show in February of '64. My older female cousins introduced me to the album Meet the Beatles, and I was hooked by its infectious sounds, so upbeat, so positive, so joyous, on songs like I Saw Her Standing There and Hold Me Tight. The Beatles opened up the world of AM top 40 mid-60s radio, and from those transistors came the wonderful potpourri of sounds, voices, rhythms that we have come to look back upon as the golden age of AM radio. From Motown to the Rolling Stones and the rest of the British invasion, from the Beach Boys to Bob Dylan. The first Dylan hit I can remember because it was on AM radio. And the one-hit wonders of garage rock, like the '67 hit Little Bit of Soul. But by the end of the decade, AM radio had given away to the album-oriented world of FM rock, as opposed to rock and roll. Groups like Cream, Led Zeppelin, and the Allman Brothers. Unfortunately, this whole shift in musical taste passed me by, as I didn't get a real stereo system till I was 15 in 1973. Up till then, I had to rely on my mother's AM car radio and a 45 RPM turntable for my musical education. By that time, I was already nostalgic for the sounds of my childhood, the early Beatles, as opposed to the later, druggier, Sgt. Pepper era Beatles. By the early '70s, AM radio was truly a musical wasteland, as most of the great one-hit garage songs represented years later in this classic collection called Nuggets were gone, replaced by crappy bubblegum pop hits like 1973's Seasons in the Sun, 74's The Night Chicago Died, and 75's Magic, which was recently used in an Ozempic commercial. Oh, 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 Ozempic. Okay. The mellower sounds of singer-songwriters Carole King, Cat Stevens, and James Taylor, and the whole LA-based country rock establishment effectively killed what I remembered as real rock and roll. But every now and then, a song would cut through the AM pablum and remind me in some way of the sound and style of the music I used to love. I can recall being electrified by the classic opening guitar riff of the Radberries' debut hit in 1972, Go All the Way. Don McLean's concurrent hit, American Pie, had the sound and beat of the more old-fashioned sounding AM radio I remembered. He even used the lyrics rock and roll, which by '72 had become a forgotten sobriquet. The genre had been called rock or hard rock for years. George Lucas's breakthrough film, American Graffiti, released in late summer '73, resuscitated interest in old-time 50s-style rock and roll, but didn't really do much for the early '60s pre-invasion British sound that I loved, as represented by glorious one-shots like the 1962 instrumental Telstar. At about the same time, Elton John's Crocodile Rock shot to #1, and like Graffiti, reminded us all of that forgotten era in AM radio with its Farfisa organ, Del Shannon runaway sound. For better or worse, I became an Elton John fan because at least he could rock out on deep album cuts like Elderberry Wine and hit singles like Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting. In fact, his rollicking piano style on songs like those, influenced by Jerry Lee Lewis, was catchy and upbeat, When I got that stereo in '73, the first albums I bought were all of Elton John's earlier albums. Tumbleweed Connection, Mad Men Across the Water, Honky Chateau. And of course, I had to get the Four Seasons greatest hits. Eda's Own Doro means gold edition. Elton was my only musical sustenance through the dark days of the early 1970s, right up until his last great AM radio single, Island Girl, released late in the summer of '75 when I was 17. I was finally able to drive my mom's '74 Plymouth Duster. I was driving that car when a song leapt out of the tinny AM radio and Stones stunned me. It was like nothing I had ever heard before, yet was also strangely familiar. The booming opening drum fill sounded like Little Eva's Locomotion, but set to thoroughbreds charging out of the starting gate, introducing a guitar riff that simultaneously evoked Telstar and my favorite James Bond theme. There was a dense wall of sound like that of Phil Spector's famous Wrecking Crew, an orchestral grandeur that in some skewed pop cultural synchronicity also evoked the great soundtrack music of those NFL films of the 1960s. There were bells and keyboards that recalled everything from Motown to the Spencer Davis Group, and a banshee-like saxophone solo that made me feel like I was listening to the saxophone for the first time. Finally, and perhaps most spectacularly, the singer was singing like he really meant it, like his life depended on it. Vocals with a passion, a reckless abandon that were obviously influenced by Bob Dylan's naturalistic talking, singing delivery. But in his thrilling, soulful final wails, also seemed to echo those of Frankie Valli's at the end of all those Four Seasons songs I loved. Those wails rekindled in me the positive, uplifting, joyous spirit my favorite early Beatles music once inspired. I was so moved, so obviously overwhelmed by the totality of this 4.5-minute masterpiece that I had to literally pull over to the curb to collect my thoughts. I was shaking my head in disbelief. I just couldn't believe what I had just heard. This amazing, unbelievable song seemed to contain bits and pieces of everything I had ever loved about rock and roll. It was almost like a theme song for rock and roll itself. Even the song's title had an inevitability about it that summed up the whole entire grand escapist nature of rock and roll, of youth, and of America. Born to Run by Bruce Springsteen. In 1995, a panel of distinguished pop music critics voted Born to Run the greatest single of all time. To say I felt vindicated by that result is an understatement. I'd been proclaiming it for 20 years. And more recently, in 2003, it was named one of 50 recordings added to the National Recording Registry by the Library of Congress. A couple of points about Born to Run must always be stated so that this magnificent piece of music is never taken for granted. Bruce wrote the song in early 1974 in this rented cottage in West Long Branch, New Jersey. After his first two albums, Greetings from Asbury Park and The Wild, the Innocent, and the East Street Shuffle, had sold poorly, and he was actually threatened with termination of his recording contract unless he came up with a hit single. So Bruce set out to self-consciously, premeditatedly write the hit single to end all hit singles. And with the possible exception of Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit, all the singles that are traditionally considered in any top 10 greatest singles of all time were all written before 1974. Led Zepp's Stairway to Heaven, Rod Stewart's Maggie May, Eric Clapton's Layla, the Beach Boys' Good Vibrations, The Who's My Generation, Dylan's Like a Rolling Stone, the Stones' Satisfaction, and pick your favorite Beatles song, your favorite Motown song, and your favorite Elvis tunes here. So with this panoply of rock and roll history spread before him, Bruce aimed for the moon and hit the stars. One of the hidden keys to Born to Run's greatness is that it is the only song of that august body to have been recorded by an evenly balanced, racially integrated rock and roll band. There's Bruce, bassist Gary Talent on the right, and in the far left background, behind Clarence Clemens and his sax, Danny Federici, 3 white men. And Clarence Clemens, drummer Ernest Boom Carter, and second from Carter on the left, pianist David Sanchez, the 3 men black. This is a 1974 photograph of the 6-month version of the E Street Band in Texas. They only recorded 1 song, and of course that was Born to Run. And since rock and roll as a genre had at its genesis whites adopting black musical idioms like the blues, gospel, and jazz, it's telling that none of those other songs mentioned, from Stairway to Heaven to Hound Dog, feature a single black musician among them, with the obvious exception, of course, of any of the Motown songs. Born to Run is thus an utterly unique realization of a rock and roll promise from the 60s delivered, that it could unite the races through the communal power of the music itself. The music itself. Born to Run is, among other things, a creation of the recording studio, a pièce de résistance of the studio's art and craft, a masterpiece of layering and overdubbing that took Springsteen and company, and yeah, that's manager-producer Mike Appel on the right, 6 months to get down in the studio, and shows it in the time and sweat spent in every minute musical detail. And while Born to Run Live is a rousing staple of every Bruce Springsteen concert ever since, it is nevertheless the studio version that is truer to the song's essence and ranks with Brian Wilson's Good Vibrations and any of the Phil Spector Wall of Sound records as one of, if not the, greatest studio creations of all time. This is a sign for the now defunct 914 Sound Studios in Blauvelt, New York, right over the New York-New Jersey border near Spring Valley, where they recorded Born to Run, Janissy at 17. And as for the lyrics of Born to Run, they're at the forefront of American arts and letters. Jim Cullen, in his book Born in the USA, Bruce Springsteen and the American Tradition, astutely points out that one could legitimately call Born to Run Springsteen's take on Walt Whitman's Song of the Open Road. Cullen compared these lines from Whitman: "Camarado, I give you my hand. I give you love more precious than money. I give you myself before preaching or law. Will you give me yourself? Will you come travel with me? Shall we stick by each other as long as we live?" To Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run lines: "Will you walk with me out on the wire? 'Cause girl, I'm just a scared and lonely rider. But I gotta know how it feels. I wanna know if love is wild. Girl, I wanna know if love is real." Born to Run also single-handedly saved rock and roll in the mid-70s from the suffocation hold that the West Coast singer-songwriters' mellow sounds had on it. In addition to the rise of ponderous FM radio art rock bands and the schlock that dominated AM radio at the time. Born to Run blasted through all of it, and in doing so opened the door for not only the more obvious careers of everyone from Bob Singer, who said Jungleland inspired Night Moves, to Meatloaf. Jim Steinman was trying to rewrite Jungleland his whole career. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Johnny Cougar, AKA John Mellencamp. Bon Jovi, AKA John Bon Jovi from Sayreville, New Jersey. And Bryan Adams from Canada. And so many of today's bands and musicians like Arcade Fire, The Hold Steady, and The Killers, as well as the similar retro rock and roll sounds that were so much of what early punk, new wave, and power pop were about when they emerged just a few years after Born to Run. In his 1979 biography of Bruce, Born to Run, by Dave Marsh, he said it best: if the meaning of punk has changed drastically since 1975, Born to Run must be counted as the record that set the stage for its reemergence at all. As influential as critics talk about the Ramones' 1976 tour of England, look at the 2 UK dates on July 4th and 5th, when they opened for the Flaming Groovies, and Johnny Ramone and the rest of the band blew the minds of those in attendance, like the future members of the Sex Pistols and their brand of punk that exploded the following year. But Bruce Springsteen's 2 visits, a week apart, to London's Hammersmith Odeon a year earlier, in November of '75, are overlooked for their influence on the rival brand of punk music by artists who were there, like Declan McManus, AKA Elvis Costello, and members of The Clash, who also emerged in '77. In fact, in the 2008 Joe Strummer biography, Redemption Song, Strummer recalled that he saw one of those London shows and exclaimed to his manager at the time that Springsteen was doing exactly what Strummer wanted to be doing on stage. Bruce performed in a black leather jacket, ripped white t-shirt, jeans, and sneakers, a true proto-punk. So if fellow Jerseyan, though born in Chicago, Patti Smith, is considered the godmother of punk, surely Bruce should be the godfather of punk. With Born to Run, its anthem, the theme song of rock and roll itself. This is what Springsteen's second manager and producer, John Landau, then Rolling Stone's records review editor, there's his credit at the bottom, intuited when he wrote his famous review after seeing Bruce one of his first times. He said, "I saw rock and roll future, and its name is Bruce Springsteen." And he called Bruce, among other plaudits, a rock and roll punk. Maybe not coincidentally, the song Bruce debuted at the Harvard Square Theater the night Landau wrote it, May 9th, 1974, was Born to Run. Okay, Mike, you're second from the right. Bob, you're... Second right? Yeah. Mike, you're here. Bob, you're there. Okay. Mike, you're here.
Okay.
You're here, Mike. And then Mike Pillot is on the end there. I'm coming.
That's your bag? Yeah, Steve came.
That was filmed at the Hammersmith Odeon in London on November 18th, 1975, on the Born to Run tour. The first time Bruce and the E Street Band played in all of Europe, and was released 20 years ago on DVD. The only performance of the song Born to Run caught on film closest to the one I described from May of 1974. Mike Appel, as Bruce's first producer and manager at the time, you were at that Hammersmith Odeon concert in London on November 18, 1975. What is your best memory from that night?
Well, you know, I liked I didn't like punk, okay? I didn't like it. What I liked was when Springsteen, when it went through his plumbing, you know, a song, it could have that edge that he could get away with it. And it was still strong, and it still was, you know, rough and gruff, and what punk was supposed to mean, at least to me. And the Stones had it too. And it was funny that when I say the Stones, because instantly a memory comes to mind.
Mike, bring the mic closer to your mouth.
Okay, a memory comes to mind. The girl outside in the front office says, "Mike, there's a call for you. There's an Andrew Loog Oldham on the phone for you." And so I said, what would he be on the phone wanting to talk to me? I've never spoken to the guy in my life. I've never said anything kind or unkind about the, you know, Rolling Stones. Why would he be on the, what's his beef? So I get on the phone and he says, "Mike," he said, "Born to Run is the greatest rock record ever made." Well, he endeared himself to me instantly, as you might expect. And I said, well, I had my favorites too. And he said, "Which one?" And I said, whoa, he's going to press me on this thing. And I said, 19th Nervous Breakdown. And there are changes in that song and mixed voice and the harmonies that they do that get me off. I can't do that today. That's the problem. I can't do that anywhere. And it's not like I'm fooling myself. I even spoke to John Landa one day. I said, "John, I can't find a group that I give a damn about." He says, "Well, that's why my record collection only goes up to 1975. Oh, okay, that was a straight answer. You know, it was real, and I could relate to it. You know, like one day with Bruce, we were talking about something, and he says, I got to go now. I said, "Do you have to go?" I said, "You're the only guy I can talk to today." And that's the truth. You can't talk to anybody about anything because there's nobody like those kind of guys that wrote great songs, you know, they could tell you where it came from and how it came about. I mean, you talk about Born to Run. Bruce had 5 distinct, different lyrics for it written.
Okay, Mike, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Okay,
We're going to get to that.
All right,
Let
let's
me
not get
introduce
ahead of
Mike formally. He was Bruce Springsteen's first manager and co-producer, described by Springsteen himself as a managerial genius. Appel had a pivotal role in the launch of Springsteen's career, getting him an audition with John Hammond, the great A&R man at Columbia Records, and engineering what remains the public relations coup of the 20th century, getting Springsteen, still a relative unknown, on the national stage on the covers of both Time and Newsweek the same week in October '75. His mark on the productions of Springsteen's first 3 albums, Greetings from Asbury Park, The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle, and Born to Run, both the album and the single, can be heard decades later in the album's musical risk-taking and lyrical romanticism. Dick?
Arlen, you forgot to mention that the Time and Newsweek covers were on my birthday, no less.
Even better. Okay.
Talk about destiny, right?
Now I'd like to introduce Bob Santelli, second from my left here. We're so excited to have him here. He's the founding executive director of the Bruce Springsteen Archives and Center for American Music at Monmouth University in West Long Branch, New Jersey. Was able to get here from there today. It took a while with all the traffic outside. Enjoy these renderings, artist renderings of the beautiful new building that will house the center, complete with a theater and a stage that's set to open in 2026, the new Bruce Springsteen Museum. and American music. So Bob is a noted blues and rock historian, curator, music journalist, and has authored more than a dozen books on American music. In 1995, he became the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's first director of education, the hall and the museum. In 2000, he became the CEO of the Experience Music Project in Seattle, which was the first ever interactive music museum. And in 2006, the founding executive director of the Grammy Museum. And Bob currently serves as director of popular music and performing arts at Oregon State University, and he teaches courses on popular culture. Please welcome Bob Santelli.
Kenneth Womack is a professor of English and popular music at Monmouth University in West Long Branch, New Jersey, where he teaches courses on Bruce Springsteen. He is the author or editor of more than 40 books and a Beatles scholar of the first order, which includes 2014's The Beatles Encyclopedia, Everything Fab Four, a 2000 multi-volume study on the life and work of Beatles producer George Martin, and his most recent, the best-selling Living the Beatles Legend, the story of the band's road manager, Mal Evans. Womack is also the author, along with his colleague, Rutgers University's Kenneth Campbell, of 2024's Bruce Songs, the music of Bruce Springsteen, album by album, song by song, which was recently named an outstanding reference source by the American Library Association's RUSA chapter. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenneth Womack.
And last but not least, my good friend of 50 years to my immediate left, Michael Pillot. Michael was the director of album promotion at Columbia Records from 1974 to 1978. We worked very closely together, and Michael had the privilege to work with some of the greatest artists of his generation. He was directly involved with the promotion of all four of Bruce Springsteen's first albums on Columbia, which remains to this day the only record label that has ever released Bruce Springsteen's music. And following his years at Columbia, he went on to become the general manager of Bearsville Records and subsequently co-founded Picture Music International, which was an early leader in music video production in the MTV days in the early 80s. So please welcome Michael Pillot.
By the way, I don't know if I've neglected to thank Dick Wingate for making this panel happen, because without Dick, there is no way this panel would have happened. So I want to make sure Dick Wingate gets a big salute. So, Mike, I'm going to kick this off. Can you tell us what you remember from the first time you met Bruce in your office in New York City in May of '71, where you heard him sing for the first time?
It was November, I think, of '71, actually. I think it was.
I thought it was May of '71, no?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. You figure a guy like me knows everything, right? Not. I come to these things with all these smart guys to my right and left, and they're smarter than me. They know more than me. I said, what the hell did you call me for? You know? I could have stayed home today. All right. What was the question now? Can you tell me what the hell I'm supposed to say now? Oh, the first time I met Bruce, yes. Okay. Actually, that was not something that you would remember. It really isn't. It's the second time that I met Bruce Springsteen that floored me. I'm not a guy that gets floored easily.
Mike, bring the mic closer to your mouth.
Okay, God, I have to learn to do that. I'm so rare on do I do this. In any case, the first time he came, it was, he played two songs. One song was about a deaf, dumb, and blind woman, and they were dancing to a deaf and blind woman. And I was saying to myself, God, well, what is that? But he's so intense. And I'm standing right next to him. I mean, the side of his face was so intense singing that song. I said, you know, I guess he thinks this is pop music because he's so into it. He couldn't be into it, you know, if he really didn't believe that this was his version of pop music. So we finished both songs, and I said, hey, look, you told me you wanted an album. Well, you know, you're gonna need more songs than 2. He says, I'll go home to my parents and, you know, in California. I'm going home for the Christmas holidays. That's why I had this November in my mind. So I said, okay. I said, all right, fine. So you'll come back? Well, yeah, I'm going to come back. You'll listen to me? I said, sure. And there was a friend of mine, and his name is Tinker. Carl Virgil West, Tinker, to be exact. And he was doing some work, you know, you want to call it management work, yeah, but it was more like, you know, doing the sound for various groups that I was involved with and he was involved with. And so he said, you know, don't worry about it, I'll make sure he comes back. All right, the phone rings in February of 2000, excuse me, 2000, what? 1972, right. That's right. I was telling somebody here that I took Bruce to see Elvis Presley, and it was in that summer of '72. But in any case, it's really funny that I should actually take, you know, Bruce to sing with my wife, who's here, right over there. She's right there. I swear it. And she went with me and a guitar player and Bruce, and he saw Elvis Presley, you know, in Madison Square Garden. And when that concert finished, I said, well, what'd you think of, you know, Elvis? And he said, God, he says, geez, there's only one king. He says, there's many pretenders to the throne, but there's only one king, and it's him. And it was him. Boy, we all got blown away. Elvis didn't disappoint us, guys. We thought we were hot shots. Boy, oh boy, Elvis knocked our socks off, boy. He was really, really great. But it's a great thing to be able to say, well, I brought Bruce to see Elvis, you know? I mean, I didn't even see him until that moment. But in any case, I don't know why. What am I talking about now?
Okay, Dick, it's your turn.
What's the subject? I know the subject has something to do with Bruce.
Well, quiet this guy over here.
Oh, yeah.
Dick, it's your turn.
Mike, tell us about the infamous first meeting with John Hammond.
Well, it's infamous because of my big mouth.
That's why it's infamous.
If I had been more judicious with my use of terms, it would not be so, you know, popular. But I finally got we finally got an appointment. And I had just walked through the doors, and Jimmy Kradicus was with me, my partner then at the time, and Bruce. And I just said, you know, maybe I better, you know, interpose here and tell, you know, John what I think of Bruce and how important I think this is. Because even though we haven't gone into my second meeting with Bruce, which is where I was blown out the doors, I didn't know what to say, actually, by what I had heard, because I had never heard anything quite like that, with the intensity that had, and the you know, self-purpose, and not being afraid, or you know, there were 3 guys in the office looking at this guy up and down, and he knew his first meeting wasn't a good one, and here he was. He went right through 5 or 6 songs, and just blew. And I'm sitting right in front of him. He's here, I'm right here. And he just played one song after another. I didn't know what to believe, that anybody wrote that many great songs. I figured, you know, the Sisters of the Muse must have got him and anointed him between the time I last saw him until this time, because there's no explanation I got that can explain this at all. But in any case, I'm back at what's the first meeting, the second meeting? Where are we?
Second
meeting.
Okay, let me just add, when John Hammond heard Bruce sing for the first time in his office, he heard one line and he said, his voice is going to last a generation.
Well,
So, Bob, next question for you.
my God.
As executive director
I'm done.
of the Bruce Springsteen Archives and Center for American Music, you must have had a lifelong connection to Bruce, his life, his music, his career. Tell us about how you first encountered him, and where were you in your life personally and professionally at that time?
I first met Bruce, believe it or not, in 1968.
Wow.
Okay, I had just moved from, was born in Jersey City and lived in West New York and right across the river from Manhattan. We moved down to the Jersey Shore. I joined a band, and back then, in the late 60s, like other places, but certainly down the shore, there were a lot of coffee houses and teen clubs. And there was a particular coffee house in Red Bank, New Jersey, called Off Broad Street Coffee House. It was actually on Broad Street. They said it was off Broad. I still don't know why they did that. But anyway, we had heard that there was this guy playing up there, mostly during the daytime, just acoustic guitar, and that he played really amazing songs. And I was told with my friends, I was in a brand new band, to go up and hear him. And we went up to Off Broad Street, and there's, sure enough, a small place. The building is still there. The coffee house isn't, but walked in, and I was floored because I was, at the time, I'd grown up, like I said, I frequented as a kid Greenwich Village, and I fell in love with a guy by the name of Tim Buckley. I don't know if any of you remember the artist Tim Buckley.
I do.
And absolutely, father of Jeff Buckley for the other generation, the late Jeff Buckley. Anyway, I thought I was really cool at the Shore because no one knew about Tim Buckley. I did, and I loved him. I walk in, and the guy playing the guitar was playing a Tim Buckley song.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. And so afterwards, after he played, I just went up and said, wow, you know, I didn't know anybody around here who knew Tim Buckley. So, oh, yeah, I like Tim Buckley a lot. And that was pretty much it until, I guess, when I went to Monmouth College, today university, and Bruce played at my freshman orientation in the August of 1969.
Wow.
And
Was that when he was with Steel Mill?
yeah, it was Steel Mill. Yeah, exactly.
Bruce's early heavy metal band in the late 60s.
Yeah. And then he went, during my time there, I think he played 9 times.
Wow.
And I think I saw all the shows. I was the entertainment editor of my college newspaper, so got to go to all the shows. And then from there, became a music critic for the Asbury Park Press and started writing about him from 1973, 74 on, and still at it today with the archives.
Dick, you're up.
I'm going to ask a question of Michael Pillot. And you were at Columbia Records when Bruce was introduced to the label. What was the, first of all, did you see him play live right at the beginning? What was your introduction
I
to him?
did. This was summer of '73. Springsteen's first 2 albums were released in the year 1973, January for Greetings and November for The Wild, the Innocent. And I was there as the local promotion manager, Houston, Texas branch. And I had done very well with the first album. Was really looking forward to the second album. Mike Appel and I were in constant contact.
I'll say.
And because I tortured him, I need more, I need more, I need more. I pretty much had exhausted whatever I could do for the first album.
Yep.
I just wanted more music. And so I was going to get to hear something from the new album. So I was hoping so, and I'm sure, Bruce was there because the album was on the release schedule for November. And so I'm sitting way in the back of the room in the Houston branch at the Fairmont in San Francisco. And even though it was a truly emerging market at the time, no one in New York gave a damn, but we saw the schedule of who was going to perform. And so as soon as the lights dimmed and we were finished with our dinner, whatever, coffee, I just got up and made my way down to the very front, right in front of the stage, because I wanted to see Bruce Springsteen. And he comes out, and Bob and I have a running joke about this. The first song that was done was really Bruce and Gary, and it was acoustic guitar and tuba. And a tuba. And I mean, that of course set me on fire, because I had no idea this is where he was going. And it was Wild Billy's Circus Story. And I mean, I was already as big a fan as could be at the label, other than maybe John Hammond, you know, and it just, I was so excited, and it was one of those moments I'll never forget, because it's the first time I did see him perform. And then the E Street Band at the time that, you know, Arlen was presenting, which was the multiracial band, came out and played music. And it was just a moment that, you know, I'll never forget. And I was pretty aggressive, meaning, the people at my table were like, "Where are you going?" I said, "This is where I'm going. I'm heading down to the front." And so, in fact, last night there was a person who was here to see the Wallflowers, who had been there for several hours waiting, and she was leaning against the door, you know, and that was the type of fan I was. Even though I was being paid to be a fan, I was.
Yeah. Kenneth Womack, tell us, as the youngest member of our distinguished panel, you were 9 years old when the song Born to Run came out. Do you remember hearing it for the first time then or later? Tell us about your musical background and how, when Bruce and Born to Run first came into it.
Well, the way he comes into my life is very different from everybody else's, but I love it, and yet it's probably the same as several of you. He came in the mail. Time Magazine. We were a Time Magazine family, not a Newsweek family. No offense. we were a Time Magazine family, and I voraciously would read it. It's why I knew more about Watergate than anybody else who was 9 years, probably too much, actually, in retrospect, at 9 years old. But I was transfixed by this guy. You know, here he is in a magazine I read cover to cover every week, and he's in my house now. So living in Houston, I went to Cactus Records. Sure. Do you remember Cactus? Of course I do. And picked up a copy within a day or so after receiving that issue in the mail. And I remember, I think like you, Arlen, radio seemed like a wasteland to me. I wasn't connecting with it. I may have been too young. I'm not sure. It just, nothing would resonate with me. But this record was different because I was a voracious reader, read lots of books, and very quickly I realized that this was like a novel. It starts off with Thunder Road, right? Where there's magic in the night, if you have a little faith. And by the end, after you've taken this journey, it breaks your heart with Jungle Land. It was a great novel for me. And I remember not long after, I would get a spiral notebook and I would retranscribe the lyrics. I bet I'm not the only one. Anybody else? I could tell. I would transcribe the lyrics so I could really study them and understand them. So I came at them with full nerd on, you know, in my discovery.
Dick, you got a question for Mike Appel?
Yeah, I'm going to give a little background when I ask the question. So, since everyone is mentioning how they met Bruce and were introduced, so I was the music director of the Brown University radio station, WBRU in Providence. We have a bunch of Brown alumni here. And when Bruce's first album came out, we were one of the first stations to start playing it. And so the Columbia Records, not Mike himself, but some of the promotion guys who worked out of the Boston branch brought Bruce to the station. And this was in the, spring of '73 when the first record comes out. Am I get that right?
And so, yeah.
And he is like a deer in the headlights. He's never been to a radio station He's so painfully shy. Now, normally when an artist that we were playing on the radio came to the station, we would do an interview. We didn't, because Bruce was just, he was thunderstruck. So it was great to meet you. He just seemed like this really shy guy, but we knew he wrote great songs. We played his records. Flash forward to a year later, and he plays at Brown University's Spring Weekend on April 26, 1974, which turns out to be a really important date in the history of Bruce, and that's where I'm getting at. He plays at Brown. I go to see him. I think Mr. Les Dinkin, who's down there, might have even promoted the show. And I stood there. I was thunderstruck. I couldn't believe it was the same guy that I couldn't get 2 words out of a year earlier. And it changed. I'd seen everybody from the Rolling Stones to Cream to everyone, Allman Brothers. I'd never seen anything like Bruce. And all I wanted to do was be involved anyway and work for Columbia Records. And fortunately, I did work for Columbia Records less than a year later. But I'm going to get to the point. That night, Bruce performed at midnight. Show started at midnight. I think it was only about 11 or 12 songs. At least that's what it says on Bruce Bass. There was a writer in the audience who was writing a review for the Brown Herald named John Andrews, and he was blown away. Well, and he wrote this amazing review. And he did it because he interviewed Bruce after the show at some ungodly hour. I think I had gone back to the dorm. And well, I'm going to let Mike pick up the story from here because Bruce was on the ropes at that point with Columbia Records, and this review made its hands to the very head of CBS Records, and was a pivotal moment.
Oh yeah, somebody like that, yeah. What happened here is they had prevented us from going in to do the 3rd album after Born to Run was already cut. And a number of things happened. I'll just try to make this quick. And what I'll say is this. When we finished Born to Run, the song, Bruce and I knew we had to go and present it to Columbia Records. So we went up to Steve Popovich's office. He was the top promotion man at Columbia Records. And when I walk in, he's got 2 phones in both ears. And he's, hey, Mike, how are you? Bruce stayed downstairs because he was a little bit shy about showing up and being naked to, being told, hey, I hate this record, or hey, I love this record. He didn't want to go through that particular, if he didn't have to go through that particular scene. So when I said, all right, you stay down here, I'll come down to get you, no problem. So I was so disappointed when I saw that he's talking to all his promotion men. And I said, hey, he said, Steve, I said, I'll come back, okay? He's, nonsense, come right up, give me the thing, give me the tape. So sure enough, I give him the tape, he puts it on, he sits right down, he plays it full blast, and he goes right back to talking to all of his 55 men out there, okay? So I'm fuming, I just said to myself, oh God, how am I gonna control myself? And I did, because when it ends, I said, well, what'd you think? He said, well, I like the guitar riff, but I don't remember anything else. Well, I said, naturally, you got 55 people you're talking to. How can you remember anything? But
Steve, by the way, was my boss.
Well, this guy wasn't Steve. This guy was a gigantic help. How about a round of applause for a guy that really did it? Right now. Yes.
Well,
Okay, Bob Santelli. Since you were at the beginning of Bruce's recording career, what's your take on his first 2 albums, and where were you when you first heard either the song Born to Run for the first time or the album? I'm assuming the song first.
Swarthmore College was where I was, and I was doing the sound for the day. And Bruce had asked me to listen to the song because he really wanted to get some feedback on it. We hadn't, gone to the studio yet. And so, since it's a windy day, I think it was in early May, this little thing in front of my mouth here, that's what his microphone sounds like as he's singing to me and the rest of the crowd that's there. So I couldn't make out, anything at all except ba 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 ba. The riff. I guess you didn't realize that was the riff when I sing it, right? I'll have to do better next time. But in any case, I told him I couldn't make out a damn thing. I said, we'll have to wait till the next time, and I'll be able to give you some feedback, But from what I could tell, it had a bunch of changes in there. It sounded interesting, but first listen, I just can't say everything that's on my mind because it's liable to confuse you, and it's liable not to be true. So let's just wait till the next time. Okay, everybody agreed to that. And of course, when I actually did hear it for the first time, the next time, I said, whoa, all those changes, my God. I really can't believe that he's a rock and roll guy that managed to put together this, opera, somehow, it's like, huh? I wasn't expecting this. I didn't even know that was this. Oh boy, is this gonna be great. I can't wait till we get this in the studio. And as we got things into the studio, it was building to this gigantic thing, like a Phil Spector session. Now, Jimmy Credicus, my partner at the time, also wrote another song, Lay a Little Lovin' on Me, by the guy who was playing lead in, what the hell was it? Hair. And he got to be very friendly with Jeff Barry, who wrote a load of hits that Phil Spector had written. And Jimmy found out by talking to Jeff just how he made those records, and Jimmy came back and told me. And we're in the car, I'm driving him home one night from Richmond, Virginia, and he says, I want to do something like Phil Spector's records. I said, well, you got a lot of lyrics there, you're going to have to, cut them down. You got a mile a minute there, and that's not what Phil does. So Ellie Greenwich and Jeff Barry write slower and simpler and understandable lyrics. You're flying, buddy, you're flying. So we got to do something about that. So he goes to sleep, and I forget about it, and he didn't forget about it. Because the next time we got together, I said, okay, those lyrics are okay. And this is such a great thing, man. God, I can't help myself. We're going to have to do this damn thing, and it better turn out right because our asses are on the line here. It's really going to be bad if this doesn't work out for Columbia. Now, of course, everything didn't work out. Everything worked out the way I wanted it to, but I had to go back to my office after leaving Bruce off. And he said, well, what are we going to do now? I said, I don't know. I said, I got to go back to my office and think about it. You think about it, and let's get together and see what happens. Well, I'm walking into the building. I said, hey, I got Born to Run. It's in my hand. I'm Advantage Appel. I've got this record, and I'm going to send it to every damn station that we know all the guys at. And they said, yeah, Mike, sure, send it to us. Yeah, we'd love to play it. In the days when you could get away with that. You know what I mean? I hear him saying, yeah. He knows that today you can't do any such thing like that. But anyway, we were able to do it, and guys called me, Kid Leo, everybody, they all called me. Mike, it's great, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. And so I told Bruce that, and he said, oh, that's great. Well, it wasn't as great as I thought it was going to be right away. Of course, somebody, I don't want to tell the name of the person, top guy there at the CBS level, above the Columbia Records level, calls me directly, Mike, what are you doing? And I said, well, I was circulating the record so that, maybe you guys had... Mike, you never do that. You never let the record go out before the tour, before it's in the stores, and you've got another 10 songs to go, buddy. Okay? That's if we say yes. Click. Hello? Hello? Anybody there?
Mike Appel,
Nope.
can I jump in here?
Sure.
Since Columbia Records corporate has shut down Mike Appel, that didn't mean a thing to me. Because I went in to talk to Steve Popovich and I said, look, this ball is rolling, and I just started making tapes. This was against every rule, as Mike just said. But we sent these out and continued to send them out. So we built an extraordinary base for the release of the Born to Run album. And to give you an idea, we hadn't conquered Los Angeles yet, but we had spread this into the West, to Phoenix, which became a top market for Bruce. But the trip that I made to Los Angeles with the test pressing of Born to Run, I went there for one reason, to play it for KLOS. This is the ABC-owned and a corporate album station on La Cienega Boulevard. I land, I get a cab to KLOS. I have the test pressing under my arm, the meeting scheduled with Tom Yates, the program director, and you're not gonna forget this name, DeBar Horbuckle is the music director. And Tom Yates leaves before we can get to Born to Run because it's open side 2. And we turn it over, and Deborah listens to this, and she goes, we're not gonna play this. All he does is mumble. So we released the record, cover of Time and Newsweek. This is how long ago this was. I sent DeBar Horbuckle a telegram. And it read, Bruce Springsteen just mumbled his way into the top 10. And the rest is history.
Okay, Bob Santelli, do you remember the question I asked you like 15 minutes ago?
Actually, I do. I do. So as I was saying, I'm the only Jersey guy here, right? I think, right? So you have to understand, when you asked about the first 2 albums, and then, of course, the arrival of Born to Run in '75. Being born and raised in New Jersey, you're born with an inferiority complex, right? you really are. You really are. You're stuck between New York City and Philadelphia, right? And Johnny Carson on a nightly basis would say what an armpit we were and how corrupt we were and what a terrible place. So you really did. And all of our great artists, from Count Basie, who was from Red Bank on the Jersey Shore, to Frank Sinatra from Hoboken, and many others, left. And they would go to New York to make their mark, or perhaps elsewhere. Basie went to Kansas City. When Bruce came with that first record, and he insisted, and you guys probably know this, but insisted that the record, that he not be from New York, because he was from Jersey, and goes on the Asbury Park Boardwalk and finds that generic postcard, Greetings from Asbury Park, New Jersey. So when that first record came out, if you were on the Jersey Shore, as I was, and you were connected to the music scene and thought we had such a great, powerful scene on the Jersey Shore, led by Bruce, and you saw that, and you couldn't believe it. I had, for the first time in my life, and from then on, never doubted the integrity of Bruce as an artist and someone who represented where he came from, because we had someone who stood up for us. You know, even when the Giants come to New Jersey, they don't even call themselves the New Jersey Giants, which really pissed us off, right? And the Jets do the same.
With the Jets.
Bruce is ours. He becomes our William Faulkner. You know, he describes in great detail. Half the people, the names, the nicknames, they were all real people. We knew all these people. You know, I mean, it was so important if you were from New Jersey, those first 2 albums. But of course, no one else. The record sold poorly, right?
Yeah, and the New York Times ran an obituary on Madame Marie.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I mean, you think about the influences.
Oh, yeah.
But I think worth pointing out, you mentioned the postcard. Think about that. This is his debut on Columbia Records. That's a die-cut cover for a brand new artist. Clive Davis was totally invested and then, of course, disappeared relatively soon after that. But that was an important, to just back up everything you just said, it really meant a lot to, you know, the North America. That here was a positive regarding New Jersey.
Yeah, it was validation for us that this guy who had been playing in Steel Mill at Monmouth College and other bands like the Bruce Springsteen Band and Dr. Zoom and the Sonic Boom and Earth and Child and Castile's his first, which everybody thought were unbelievable. We had someone, how come no one wanted to know about him? How come he wasn't famous? And then all of a sudden that record comes out. Born to Run took it to a completely different level. You know, Bob Dylan, when he first heard the Beatles, he pulls over. I think there was, you know, people, when they hear seminal things on the car radio, you got to stop driving. It's just too dangerous.
How did you hear Born to Run for the first time, Bob? How did you
Well, that's it. I'm getting to that because I'm in a car. I'm in a car with my best friend who would later go on to form Interscope Records with Jimmy Iovine. His name is Tom Wally. We're driving to go surfing, actually, and it comes on a tinny car radio. He had a Rambler station wagon, and we pulled over. No lie. I said, oh my God. I had just got back from Europe. I bicycled through Europe. I get back a week, and all of a sudden the record comes on. And I couldn't believe it. We just couldn't believe it. We thought the best band we had ever heard, and we had heard Led Zeppelin and we had heard the Rolling Stones, because if you lived in Asbury Park, there was a place called Convention Hall. And during the summer, we got everybody go through, from Janis Joplin, Dave Clark 5, Paul Revere and the Raiders, Jefferson Airplane, The Who, the Stones. And anyone who was in the music, in the business or bands, you went to the show or worked them. So everybody would go, and that was kind of like their college education. You were able to see these bands in Jersey. You didn't have to go to New York or Philly or Atlantic City. You got to see it right there. And that band, Steel Mill, which I always say, I had seen Led Zeppelin a week before, as did Bruce. Woodstock weekend. Half of us didn't go to Woodstock because we wanted to see Led Zeppelin in 1969, August 69. And a week later, I saw Steel Mill with my friend Tom Wally, and we both agreed, absolutely, and we were big Led Zepp fans, Steel Mill was better.
I can
Steel Mill was better.
I can remember you telling me that story, you know, and just as an aside, I remember being on the bridge in San Francisco, right? And listening to K-Sound and hearing Breakdown by Tom Petty. And crossing the bridge, I'm on my way to see Boz Scaggs, right? Crossing the bridge, pull over, use the payphone. I had the number in the studio and say, what was that? You know, so there are moments like that.
Yeah, they're seminal moments, for
Tom
sure.
Wally, I knew Tom Wally myself. I liked him. He's at Interscope. That's where I met him. Another record man.
Kenneth, give us some perspective. You haven't had a chance to talk much. What you know, you have written so many books about Bruce, and but this era, this you know, 74, 75, and the creation of Born to Run, and the process, which was so painstaking. Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. I have the great privilege every year, at least once, sometimes twice, to teach Born to Run to our undergraduates at Monmouth, and it is a dream. And it's a special dream. It's always, teaching is wonderful, no matter which generation is your audience. But right now, it's really special. Today's generation, they get maligned a lot, but these guys are magnificent. They have an intellectual curiosity I haven't seen in decades of teaching. It's magnificent, and I'm not surprised. We raised them this way, right? We raised them on the Food Channel, and they have Wikipedia and knowledge at their fingertips.
Spotify.
Absolutely. Every song they want to hear, they can have instant access. And what is so wonderful is when we encounter Born to Run, I often get to see students. I have the privilege of listening and watching as they have that first experience. And what we do with the song that makes it so special is we take those operatic parts that you created in the studio, Mike. We go moment by moment, and we understand, we take it apart, we put it back together. And it's a revelation, that tune, right? And what is magnificent about the students, many of my students, fortunately, are music majors. So I often have the sheet music up in my PowerPoint presentation, and they're following along out in the audience. They're drummers, they're following Boom, right? There's the incredible work by Danny Federici, right? On that. The bass line by Gary Talent is a revelation. You know, not to mention what Bruce and others are doing. So I have that experience of watching them make that discovery. They're not pulling over. Thank goodness we don't have cars in the classroom yet. But what they do is they have this kind of out-of-body experience. They want to know more. They want to understand how the tracking worked, how you were able to capture that music in that studio as opposed to any of the fancy studios in the city.
Yeah, it was 16 track, not 24 track.
That's right. You know, these are the questions and issues they have. As far as perspective goes, you know, Arlen, in his opening remarks, referred to the singer-songwriter era, right? And some of it's more ersatz, sugary moments, but then you occasioned us with discussion of Carole King and other real stalwarts, right? Bruce comes along when we look at the long sweep of rock history, and he reminds us of, no offense to anybody, but the legacy of the Beatles. Right? Incredible songwriting.
Of course.
Craftspersonship. As John Lennon would call them, these are craft songs, right? They're crafted from different parts that are hybrid and then grafted together.
Original.
Yes, and highly original. And again, young me, I can't forget this. It's part of who I am, was just
I think
thunderstruck by those words. It was the language.
Well, also Born to Run is different than the first two albums in its craft, because it was written on a piano. Mm-hmm. And
Partly it.
the first two albums were clearly written on guitar.
And I might add that there is a clear lyrical difference, as Mike pointed out, and as Bob, in the great interview he carried out when we announced our archive some years ago, teased out of Bruce, the idea of how he had put aside, thank goodness, his rhyming dictionary. Right? Suddenly, my students have a lot of fun with those first two albums, scanning, like scanning those lines that run over with enjambment, right? One line to the next. It's out of control. We start to try to figure how does he get that many syllables in 4 measures? Those are world records. But by the time you guys are making Born to Run, there's suddenly an economy.
Yep.
That's very different, and that must have been self-conscious, right?
Well, he wanted to write like he wanted to write like songs like Phil Spector recorded, and so you know those things are not like Gatling gun lyrics like
My Baby is not. Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly right. In fact, one time Bruce said to me, he says. Well, actually, I had originally said to him, I said, geez, he said, you know, we put a lot of things on this record. I said, but Phil actually put, you know, a trap case, a drum trap case on the record. He played the trap case, not the actual bass drum that goes in it. He said, why didn't you tell me? I said, because your song is flying 1,000 miles an hour, and, you know, Be My Baby's boom, 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 you know? And he said, well, you know, geez, you could have told me. I said, hey, I told you about the Glockenspiel, didn't I? And he laughed.
Which is a masterstroke,
He
right?
laughed. He laughed at that. Yeah.
That's an absolute masterstroke.
He loved it, you know. He loved it, and we all loved it when that went on the record, because it was like so
The orchestration.
rinky-dinky, you know, and so gigantic. So it's a small little thing, but it cuts through like a knife. You know, it's perfect. And it's Phil Spector. It was just... Everything there for that record was meant to be. That's all I could say. We couldn't get in our own ways. It was just meant to be, okay? Sometimes you do enough things in life where like the gods owe you a favor. Born to Run was such a thing in my life and Bruce's life, and this guy's life, and this guy's life, and that guy's life,
right.
and your life, and this guy's life, and all of your lives too, apparently.
There you go. Bob Santelli. It's not surprising, given your background, that you would become executive director of such an institution
Right. What a
as the
surprise.
Bruce Springsteen Center for American Music. Did you have a vision of it for years or decades, or was it something that just naturally grew out of your continued personal love of Bruce music and your professional career?
That's a good question. I was a music journalist up through about 1993, full-time music journalist, writing for Rolling Stone on down. And at the time, the idea of a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and museum was just hatching from Jan Wenner and Ahmet Ertegun. And to make a long story short, there were 5 Rolling Stone writers who were deputized to basically become this new thing called a music museum curator. I was one of them. And I became that and fell in love with the whole concept. It brought me on a completely different career. As you said, Dick, some of the museums I created or worked on. And I made a lot of contacts and a lot of friends in the world of music and museums over the years. And maybe 10 or 12 years ago, I started getting calls from friends at the Smithsonian and the Library of Congress. And they were saying, hey, you're from Jersey, you know Bruce Springsteen. Could you introduce us? Because we'd really like to get his papers and his memoirs and things at the Library of Congress in particular. That would make sense. He's certainly an important enough artist. And then I started thinking, if I get the papers and have all those papers go to Washington, D.C. and leave Jersey, there'll be a hit on me, for crying out loud, right? I ain't doing it. So, believe it or not, there was a whole collection of Bruce Springsteen memorabilia, kind of an archives, put together by something called the Friends of Bruce Springsteen. It lay dormant in an Asbury Park public library, which was broke and had no money to curate it, preserve it, conserve it, and it started to mold. And a good friend of mine, her name is Eileen Chapman, she and I basically said, we got to get it out of there, it's just too important. I went to Monmouth University, it's now Monmouth University, where I went to school and also was a professor at a particular time. And I told them, this needs to come here. And from that point on, the concept grew to the point where it's the way I think. I grew bigger and bigger and bigger. And before I said, maybe this thing should have its own place instead of just being in the library of Monmouth University. And I had worked on the Woody Guthrie Center in Tulsa. And I had this vision. Basically, I figured, I'm from New Jersey. I'm from the Jersey Shore. I went to Monmouth University, and quite honestly, I rode Bruce Springsteen's coattails as a journalist, right? So why not? And so I came up with this idea, blew it by Eileen. She said, wow, that's amazing. I called John Landau, and I said, I'm figuring, Bob, slow down. We're not going to do this, He liked it, and he says, you should tell Bruce and see what Bruce thinks. So I said, okay. So John and I, a month or so later, go out to see Bruce at his farm, and we get there, and John says, tell him. I said, okay. Bruce, as you say, he doesn't say much, right? He's not a man of many words, and so I go into my spiel, and I kind of thought what he would say, and I was ready for it, and here's why. I give him the whole thing. He's just listening and saying nothing. He could be thinking about what he's going to have for lunch or what his next song he's going to write. We're in this recording studio. Finally, he says, Bob, hey, that's really, I'm humbled. I think it's a great idea, but I'm just a chapter in the history of rock and roll. I can't have just one thing about me. And I knew that. And I said, well, actually, I'm thinking even bigger. What about if we made it the Bruce Springsteen Archives and Center for American Music? That way we can have the book of rock and roll, and you are but a chapter. He didn't say anything, and he said, let's go see where you want to put it. honestly, John and I get in the car, Bruce gets on his motorcycle, and we go to Monmouth University, right? And we go to the place where, right at the time, there was a police station there that they were going to knock down, and that was the space Monmouth University donated the land. And I said, it would be right here. And no pictures, no nothing, just me talking. He goes like this, it'll do. Gets on his motorcycle and leaves, and John and I are looking like,
Did he say yes?
We doing this now? And that really started. It was like 8 or 9 years ago, and next June, we will open the Bruce Springsteen Archives at Center for American Music.
Yes.
Well, it's worth mentioning that the current museum is packed in a little house that's right across the street. Actually,
48,000 objects.
Across I mean, they are stacked to the ceiling. And this wonderful woman that runs it and should be happy to show you around if you make your way
Can I just
down
add
to Monmouth.
one comment? You know, Bruce is being a little disingenuous when he says he's only a chapter. What makes Bruce unique is that I used to call him the human jukebox of rock and roll. Within his music is the history of American popular music of the previous 50 years.
Sure.
And Bruce was the future of rock and roll. So his music really does encompass all of American music.
Yep.
Dick, you're up next.
No, I think Mike wants to say something.
I don't know.
You and I talked about
This
an antique concept of be kind, rewind today. And we still have to finish the chapter, using that term, on Born to Run itself and how it became an official release. And my first business meeting with 30 executives, this is January of '75, there was an extraordinary business meeting about the subject of who do we focus on this year? And I had heard Born to Run in Philadelphia at the Main Point. Bruce was there to join Jackson Browne and David Lindley to save the Main Point. They did a residency there, and I went down, and Born to Run was performed by Bruce Springsteen acoustically. So the first time I heard that song, I heard every word, you know, and it was powerful. So I get to this meeting, and there's a discussion about, you know, do we focus on Billy Joel? Do we focus on, and you know, this is my new job, and I'm going, we're Columbia Records. We can chew gum and do many other things at the same time. And, you know, Mike had delivered Born to Run, and they were saying, you know, Born to Run, you know, it's great, but it's too long. It's not 3 minutes and 30 seconds. It's not a single. And I said, come on, it's a brilliant piece of music. Let's go with it. You know, we've got all this feedback. It's fantastic feedback. And I know, you know, this is the single, you know, the idea of making it work at Top 40 radio. And I said, has anyone tried to edit it? No. I said, I want a crack at it. Okay, so we booked time, went to the studio. Columbia had, at that time, a number of studios. And of course, I knew walking over to the studio on 52nd Street that I couldn't take out any lyrics. They were just brilliant. So the only thing I focused on was the bridge. But then that was the boss making a statement solo-wise. So I came back and said, there is no edit. And so if you noticed, it came in at, I believe, what you delivered was 4 minutes and 29 seconds. The single released was 4 minutes and 24 seconds. So we faded it a little earlier than, you know, what was delivered. But you know, I grew up in New Orleans, and I knew, this is incredible to be able to say this, but my first concert, a radio station concert that I went to, sponsored by a local radio, top 40 radio station, was Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard, and Fats Domino. Now, those are 3 of the original inductees into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah, well.
So that's my first rock event, rock and roll event. It was a rock and roll event. And it was extraordinary, you know? So I knew what my career path was then, and, you know, I still think about it going, how lucky I was. Right. And really quickly to something that Arlen alluded to with Elton John. I loved Elton John. And I took my mom and dad to see Elton John and got them a seat on the stage at a place called a Warehouse in New Orleans. And Elton comes out to do his encore, and it's Burn Down the Mission. And he's doing his Jerry Lee Lewis. You alluded to it, right? And he kicks the piano stool, and it flies over my father's head. Whoa. And he goes, we're out of here. So my mom and dad left. So the rock and roll has been a big part of my life for many, many years. And I tried to get my parents immersed, but that was sort of the end of it.
Okay, I think that's great. I think with the time we have left, Kenneth, starting with you, and then going to Bob Santelli, then back to you, Mike, and Mike Appel, finishing up with you. It's 50 years later. What is your take on Born to Run, either the song and or the album? Ken?
I think it's just as fresh and powerful as it was then. You know, not every record stands the test of time. At Bob's suggestion some years ago, I set up a record club that we host every month. You're all welcome to join. It's free. It's online. And we've discovered very clearly that a number of albums have not stood the test of time. Our memories are better of them, right? Movies are like this too. You have movies that meant so much to you, and then you revisit them, and it would have been better to keep them back in the storehouse of your recollections. Born to Run is not that album. Born to Run is absolutely as fresh as when Bruce came in the mail to my house, and I bought that album at Cactus Records. It is just as fresh today. Certainly, first and foremost is the guitar playing. You know, every lick, every note is just as fresh as it was then. But it's also the way it was crafted. I mean, the painstaking work that, you know, Mike and his team put in to bring that record to fruition is why it stands the test of time. In the same way you mentioned him earlier, that George Martin did not let a Beatles album out of his earshot unless it was ready to go to the marketplace. And I know Bruce was concerned, right, that maybe it wasn't quite ready when Mike played him that first acetate. But you know what?
Was that the one that he threw into the pool?
The one that he drowned, yes.
Yes, that's a story worth telling.
Yeah,
Go
an
ahead.
ignominious death if ever there were one. But I think if he were here with us, he would understand why that record lasts and why students hear it today, just like we did way back then. And it's arresting. You know, you hear that little riff that we know he borrowed from the Locomotion, but it just leaps into a just moment of pure brilliance.
Bob?
Well, for me, the album and the song are personal, right? Being from New Jersey and the Jersey Shore, as I said before, this was our proud moment for sure. And as a music journalist and as I said before, working on the creation of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, a number of music critics would get together at Rolling Stone. We were putting together something called, but 500 songs that shaped rock and roll. And we would battle over which one should be in it and why. We should have made a documentary out of it. It was great. But what we found was there were 500 songs, could have come up with 1,000, but we all realized that there were perfect songs, the absolutely perfect songs, of which there were only a handful. And some of them would have been like a Rolling Stone, Johnny B. Good, Chuck Berry song. More recent, I guess, Smells Like Teen Spirit. But Born to Run, everyone agreed, was a perfect song. And the record, the album, a perfect album, thanks to this guy and others. It was. And you know, I'm always reluctant when people ask me this, because I'm from New Jersey, and you know, Bruce Springsteen archives, of course he's going to say it, right? So very often when I teach history of rock and roll and some of the courses, I'm reluctant to say that. I say it in passing, but I also give credit to a lot of the other songs. But privately, it's number one. It's the greatest rock and roll song of all time.
Yes. Michael Pillot.
I agree with most of what everything Bob Santelli just said, except, and I'll use a personal example.
All right.
While the record's being made, Springsteen paid me a visit to my office at Columbia. And it was pretty extraordinary, because the entire building was abuzz because he was coming to see me. And he was so excited about a track that he had just finished called Night, track 3 on the album, right? And reel-to-reel, put it on my reel-to-reel player, and we played it, and he's sitting, there are only 2 chairs in my office besides mine, and he's sitting, and my back's to him because I'm looking away and watching the tape wind, and finished it, turned around and said, finally, I get a fantastic instrumental out of Bruce Springsteen. And he goes, oh no, man, I just haven't finished the lyrics. And I love the fact that in Arlen's, if you listen to that track, that was Telstar. And it was like, and I went, no, you don't need lyrics. That was like the first argument I ever had with Bruce Springsteen. But this is about as perfect, and it's one of the reasons this visual aid is here. This box set was the 30th anniversary, has the footage, it has a great book, it's everything that one needs to familiarize themselves with Born to Run.
Yeah, it has the full Hammersmith Odeon performance, which we saw Born to Run from, and
it even has Lost in the Flood live, and Cynthia and I went to an Italian movie in Rhinebeck, New York, at our little art house. It was great, won 6 Caesars. I forget the name of the movie, actually. But anyway, we go and we got to go to the market. I go, okay. And WDST, Radio Woodstock, is the station that's always on in the car. And we drive over to the Super Stop and Shop. And I told Mike Appel the story earlier. The station plays Lost in the Flood. Now, I had not heard Lost in the Flood on the radio in a long time. And so Cynthia says, we got to go to market. I said, you can go to the market. I am not getting out of the car until this song finishes. And I did. I stayed in until it was done, and I turned the car off and met her inside. But there's so many great Bruce Springsteen songs, but there's so many great ones on here. So if you haven't purchased, I told Dick I was going to be a pitch man, because I've always been a pitch man. But the fact is that this is a brilliant box set.
Okay, Mike
Thanks for inviting me.
Mike Appel, 50 years later, what's your take on Born to Run, the album or the song or both?
I can take you 40 years. I might as well end. Yeah, right. I need this guy.
Take that microphone to his chin.
That's exactly right. Well, I can tell you what Bruce had to say to me on the 40th anniversary. And he said he was in his convertible Hudson, 52 Hudson, driving around, you know, down the shore. And he told me that. And I said, it was pitch dark out. And he said to me, Mike, he said, I just listened to the song once again. When he says the song, it's, you know, Born to Run. And I said, yeah. He said, it still holds up. God damn it. It just won't go away. He said, congratulations. I said, congratulations to you. You wrote it. And that's it. It is that way. Thank you.
Dick, it's 3 o'clock. I don't know what our time is. Do we have more time, or are we wrapping up, or I don't...
Can we do Q&A? I don't know if there's a mic for that. Nope?
No
Okay.
more time. Okay, I think that's it.
Yeah, I think...
But what a way to end it, folks. Our distinguished panel. Michael Pillot, Bob Santelli,
Thanks
Mike
for coming.
Appel, Kenneth Womack, and Dick Wingate. And thank you, everybody, and everybody streaming in.
In the day we sweated out on the streets of a runaway American dream. At night we ride to mansions of glory and suicide machines sprung from caves.